Hi, everyone. In our presentation today, we will explore the experiences of new Canadians, the new unique challenges faced by immigrants and refugees, and consider how we can best support them as counselors. Next slide, please. So just an overview. I'll begin by laying out some key clinical concepts that will provide a foundation for our understanding, specifically around the aspects of social justice and identity development in the context of migration. We will then move through to deepen our awareness of both the refugee and immigrant experiences before looking at religious diversity and intersectionality as additional influences for this population. Following this, we will observe Karen and Helvetia's role play and then discuss what stood out for us as a group, and we will wrap up with a concluding message. Okay, so here I'd like to just highlight the scale of migration to Canada from a 2024 report on immigration with a total of 483,000 entering. This is an increase of around 12,000 from 2023. And considering this proportion, the majority enter as immigrants, while a smaller but significant group arrive as refugees or protected persons. I'll also emphasize here that they arrive under very different circumstances, which significantly influence their mental health risk factors and counseling goals. And again, we'll explore this more deeply as we move through our presentation. I'll add as well that both of these groups are already facing inequities as soon as they step foot in Canada, which are different or compounding to what they've already experienced in their country of origin. Next slide, please. So here are two, I'll discuss two concepts that expand on the processes and influences involved in adapting to a new culture. Firstly, John Barry's fourfold model of acculturation. I'll just define acculturation. It refers to the process of adopting the cultural traits and social patterns of another group, often as a result of immersing into that culture for a prolonged period of time. So it's a two-way exchange where both the host culture and newcomer influence each other. So traditions, practices, and beliefs on both sides are altered. So John Barry's model is a framework for understanding the different strategies that people use when they enter into a new culture. And there are four that I'll just move through briefly. Marginalization is when people are disconnected from both cultures and often results in a lack of belonging and associated with increased mental health challenges, including alienation and identity confusion. An example of this would be refugees and asylum seekers. Separation preserves their own cultural heritage and avoids adopting the new culture, which may cause isolation. And this is typical and common in older adults where there's significant language barrier or have strongly developed values around their culture. Assimilation adopts new culture and lets go of their original cultural identity. And this tends to happen when there's social pressure and can result in identity loss. For example, youth who are vulnerable and at a vulnerable stage of needing to fit in and need that sense of belonging early on in life. In integration, people are adopting elements of the new culture and maintaining elements of their own culture. So this supports belonging and well-being and tends to happen within those who have a higher level of education or with people who have a strong family support networks. Next slide, please. So this model is Bron Fenbrenner's ecological model, and this helps us to see the larger systems that are influencing these individuals' experiences because it does not happen in isolation. They are shaped within family systems, community, institutional laws, and through cultural values and policy. So it will be helpful to keep these layers in mind as we explore counseling needs and what level of intervention is most appropriate with our clients. And next slide. So this will just share a video. It focuses on the refugee experience.
Around the globe, there are approximately 60 million people who have been forced to leave their homes to escape war, violence, and persecution. The majority of them have become internally displaced persons, which means they have fled their homes but are still within their own countries. Others have crossed a border and sought shelter outside of their own countries. They are commonly referred to as refugees. But what exactly does that term mean? The world has known refugees for millennia, but the modern definition was drafted in the UN's 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees in response to mass persecutions and displacements of the Second World War. It defines a refugee as someone who is outside their country of nationality and is unable to return to their home country because of well-founded fears of being persecuted. That persecution may be due to their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion, and is often related to war and violence. Today, roughly half the world's refugees are children, some of them unaccompanied by an adult, a situation that makes them especially vulnerable to child labor or sexual exploitation. Each refugee's story is different, and many must undergo dangerous journeys with uncertain outcomes. But before we get to what their journeys involve, let's clear one thing up. There's a lot of confusion regarding the difference between the terms migrant and refugee. Migrants usually refers to people who leave their country for reasons not related to persecution, such as searching for better economic opportunities or leaving drought-stricken areas in search of better circumstances. There are many people around the world who have been displaced because of natural disasters, food insecurities, and other hardships. But international law, rightly or wrongly, only recognizes those fleeing conflict and violence as refugees. So what happens when someone flees their country? Most refugee journeys are long and perilous, with limited access to shelter, water, or food. Since the departure can be sudden and unexpected, belongings might be left behind, and people who are evading conflict often do not have the required documents like visas to board airplanes and legally enter other countries. Financial and political factors can also prevent them from traveling by standard routes. This means they can usually only travel by land or sea and may need to entrust their lives to smugglers to help them cross borders. Whereas some people seek safety with their families, others attempt passage alone and leave their loved ones behind with the hopes of being reunited later. This separation can be traumatic and unbearably long. While more than half the world's refugees are in cities, sometimes the first stop for a person fleeing conflict is a refugee camp, usually run by the United Nations Refugee Agency or local governments. Refugee camps are intended to be temporary structures, offering short-term shelter until inhabitants can safely return home, be integrated to the host country, or resettle in another country. But resettlement and long-term integration options are often limited. So many refugees are left with no choice but to remain in camps for years and sometimes even decades. Once in a new country, the first legal step for a displaced person is to apply for asylum. At this point, they're an asylum seeker and not officially recognized as a refugee until the application has been accepted. While countries by and large agree on one definition of refugee, every host country is responsible for examining all requests for asylum and deciding whether applicants can be granted the status of refugee. Different countries' guidelines can vary substantially. Host countries have several duties towards people they have recognized as refugees, like the guarantee of a minimum standard of treatment and non-discrimination. The most basic obligation towards refugees is non-refoulement, a principle preventing a nation from sending an individual to a country where their life and freedom are threatened. In reality, however, refugees are frequently the victims of inconsistent and discriminatory treatment. They are increasingly obliged to rebuild their lives in the face of xenophobia and racism. And all too often, they aren't permitted to enter the workforce and are fully dependent on humanitarian aid. In addition, far too many refugee children are out of school due to lack of funding for education programs. If you go back in your own family history, chances are you will discover that at a certain point, your ancestors were forced from their homes, either escaping a war or fleeing discrimination and persecution. It would be good of us to remember their stories when we hear of refugees currently displaced, searching for a new home.
What a great insight into the refugee experience. Now, to bring it to Canada, Canada signed the 1951 convention, and as such, opened her doors to people who fear for their life and want to submit a claim for asylum. Once that claim has been submitted to the Refugee Protection Board of the Immigration and Refugee Board, if it is accepted, then the person becomes a protected person. That's the quote, a protected person. And it can take up to 2 years in some cases for individuals who have been accepted to then become permanent residents. And again, sometimes up to 3 years for them to fully become Canadian citizens. So you can imagine the trauma or the anxiety of waiting, in addition to all that they've gone through the immigration process. With this slide, we just want to demonstrate that the number of claims that are being submitted is increasing every year. And in 2023, it was the highest that we had seen. We're very sure that for now, it would have changed again, given the war that is happening around the world. And therefore, us as professionals, we are expecting that we're going to see migrants come through our door seeking for help. And we are also expecting that we might have to support children related to immigrant families. Glebova and Al, they put together a contextual therapy model to support professionals in their dealings with refugees and other migrants. And they highlighted 5 dimensions that we can look at to support our holistic treatment or intervention. And the first I would like to talk about is the facts. We need to consider the biological history, the bare facts, the injustice that immigrants have gone through when we are supporting them. We also need to consider their emotions, their thoughts. How are they feeling and responding to the trauma that they have gone through? What are the system dynamics? The family, most of the times you're going to see refugees come in family situations. So what are the dynamics within these families? Have roles been reversed because of what they have gone through? Have the younger ones now, are they the ones going and being the breadwinners and supporting the elderly ones? And if that's the case, what conflicts arise as a result of this? And then we also have to understand how individuals define themselves in relation to other things. What is the deeper meaning that they attach to themselves? How do they see themselves now in relation to the pre-migration and possibly post-migration trauma? In order to provide a holistic therapeutic environment for these individuals that come to us for support, we need to take into consideration all of these facts. In the next slide, we're going to talk about how intersectionality is also an approach that we need to consider when we support refugees or other migrants coming to us. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Beyond One Story. In this edition today, we want to address the issue of applying intersectionality lens appropriately. How should we do this? What should we consider? We have been guided by two resources, one by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw and the other one by Gleboval AR, and these are all found in the reference section of this edition. So let's get into it. How can we apply the intersectionality lens correctly? In order to do this, we first have to understand that individuals are made up of complex identities, and that if we as professionals fail to understand all of these identities that makes up the individual, then there's a great chance that we might not address the problem that has been brought to us correctly. Individual identities for a refugee, for example, might be that she is a racialized woman. Okay, she has gone through trauma, she is a parent, okay, she is a Christian, and because of all of this identity, she feels that she has been marginalized, or she's going through stress, depression, and she has come to us. If we separate these identities and try to help her, it will not be a complete package for her, because we'll be missing some points. So the intersectionality approach requires that we kind of identify all of these identities, but treat them as one together to be able to then help our clients. The second thing we need to know with this approach is that the client also is, their experiences is multiple contexts. Contexts like family, like the individuals themselves, their trauma from pre-migration and even post-migration, the systems in Canada that are supposed to support immigrants, that are supposed to support newcomers that are not, can actually all contribute to a client sitting in front of you. And if you're just focusing on what is happening with the client without looking at a broader context, without looking at the multiple contexts, then there's a great chance that many individuals will fall through the cracks, and the therapeutic relationship will not be established, will not be able to support them effectively. So taking these 2 points into account, what we are trying to say here is that the intersectionality approach is a tool that healthcare professionals can use to show visibility for the client and acquire justice for them. And we are ensuring that people who are sitting at the margins of society are not left out, right? Their issues are tackled from all the facets that needs to be taken into consideration. And we are also saying that using an intersectionality approach is not really an option that you want to decide whether to use it or not. We are saying that it is an ethical obligation for a mental health professional who is seeking justice, social justice for their client, to employ the intersectionality approach in order not just to help the client, but to also improve the therapeutic alliance. Thank you very much for being with us on this episode, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you, Alicia. That's really great insight into intersectionality. Building from the refugee experience, we can see differences within each group. While there can be an overlap between refugee and immigrant experiences, refugees are often forced to flee due to the danger or persecution, whereas immigrants typically plan their move for many different reasons, often in search of new opportunities. In this way, I will specifically be speaking of Canadian immigrants who have arrived in Canada as trained professionals and how their adjustment process can look very different, especially when it comes to finding work in their field, having their credentials recognized, and navigating new cultural expectations. I'll be drawing on insights from our textbook, Meow and Arthur, and recent research from the labor market. Research showing how credential barriers, discrimination, and precarious work negatively affects immigrant professionals. Underpinning the need for holistic, relational, and culturally infused counseling. After that, we'll watch a short TED Talk on the hidden struggles of immigrant professionals. So looking at the research, when we look at the research, Meow explains that immigrants who arrive as professionals often face strong acculturation and role strain pressures as they adjust to new culture, while experiencing the loss of their professional identity. Adding to this, that they have financial strain from the precarious work that they are forced to take through unstable employment, and it increases mental health stress for professionals who previously held stable careers. Additionally, the hiring practices often create barriers when employers overlook foreign credentials or questioning whether their skills will transfer into the Canadian workplace, which is often framed as needing Canadian experience, even though you cannot gain that experience without actually being hired. So highly skilled immigrants still experience underemployment and social exclusion in Canada, creating prolonged stress, low self-confidence, which often leaves them with a sense of identity loss. And lastly, Arthur, 2018, concludes that leaning on their cultural identity through social supports and spiritual or religious practices frequently become an essential source of strength for professional immigrants as they navigate the pressures to be employed in Canada. So next we'll look at TED Talk to deepen our understanding about their experiences. It's only a short clip, and if you have time, you can watch
We all
the
have
rest.
them. Having a dream in life can provide direction, motivation, and a sense of purpose. For 19 years, I held a dream to build a great life in Canada with my family and be a respected member of the society. This dream defined everything about me, including who I married. It gave me energy and hope for my preferred future. And when the opportunity came to fulfill that dream, it crashed and I burned with my family. That hurt and left me with a scar. I don't want that experience for anybody else. We had a dream that showed Canada as a North Star. When you have a clear vision of the future you want, you get a motivation to go after it with everything you have. This dream inspired us to leave everything behind in Nigeria, our families, friends, culture, successful careers in business. We left the familiar and comfortable in search of our Canadian dream. That's what dreams do for you. And so, on September 6, 2012, we left Nigeria and flew into the city of Calgary on a 24-hour flight. We were overwhelmed with joy on arrival that travel fatigue could not even mask our feeling of fulfillment. I mean, being welcomed to Canada as permanent residents, that was monumental. Yeah, we made it. My wife decided to go back to school in order to switch careers. I started applying for professional IT jobs right away. I was ready, and Canada was going to roll out a red carpet for me. I'll tell you why. I am very qualified. I had 12 years of experience, heaps of certifications. Why wouldn't you hire me? Well, recruiters and hiring managers ignored me. I lacked Canadian experience. Until then, I didn't know that my credible IT experience and education could not be translated into the Canadian work environment. And so, I worked 3 minimum wage jobs. Did you know that a new immigrant needs to work minimum wage jobs in order to earn Canadian work experience? So, in order to do that, I worked the 3 in order to earn that elusive Canadian work experience and provide for my family. Fantastic. My Canadian dream was finally coming true. My nightmare was just starting. Due to the nature of these jobs, I barely slept for 4 hours daily. I was irritable, emotionally withdrawn, and desperate. Yet, the more I struggled to get out of that spinning wheel of poverty, the less available I was for my family. I hardly saw my kids. When I got back from work, the kids were still in bed. By the time I woke up, our dingy basement was empty. Providing for my family was a mental torture. I increasingly felt like a failure. I struggled to meet our basic needs, choosing to spend our money on either groceries or gas. I felt vulnerable and considered going back to Nigeria several times. But there was nothing to go back to. We had abandoned our careers, sold our landed properties, and 2 businesses. Should I have known that my host country had no plans to help me reintegrate back into my profession? Canada, we have a problem, and it's a collective crisis.
Okay. So for counseling approaches for individuals like Depo in the video, it begins by working to understand the acculturation stress and cultural or family expectations that they face. Meow explains that these pressures are a normal part of adapting to a new environment, and for us counselors, naming them in a session can really help them feel validated and understood. Also, as counselors, we need to recognize the role of workplace discrimination and biases that exist. Research shows that many of the barriers immigrant professionals encounter are systemic rather than personal, and discussing this with our clients can help prevent self-blame. And as mentioned earlier, Arthur 2018 emphasizes how cultural identity, community connections, and spiritual practices can be important sources of strength for immigrants. Along with providing emotional support, counselors can explore supports that bridge programs, find mentorship, credential assessment, and community resources that help support them getting into the labor market. We need to acknowledge that it means what it means for professional immigrants when they cannot work in their established careers, and instead of being pushed into work below their skill level. Precarious work influences immigrants' identity, confidence, and even their role within their family. Because of this, counseling approaches should include culturally infused practices that consider how cultural identity, spiritual or religious beliefs, and social support systems shape a client's migration and work experiences. Counselors can then adapt interventions to help clients navigate both career challenges and the adjustment process.
Yeah, next slide. So as Helvetia discussed in her Beyond One Story conversation, intersectionality not only affects the way a person experiences and is experienced, but it can intensify the challenges faced by individuals who have multiple marginalized identities. Our subtopic, religious diversity, considers the impact that religious diversity has as it relates to the experience of new Canadians. An intersectional lens recognizes that the religious affiliations differ greatly among individuals, shaped by their unique identities and the specific cultural and systemic challenges they encounter as they arrive here. A study on Afghan refugees by Gokani 2023 summarizes that the effects of religion and religious coping on mental health appear to be highly contextualized and nuanced. Essentially, sometimes religious and spiritual affiliations can be helpful, and sometimes they can hinder. As Mio 2022 summarizes, the quality of support and resources for this population often outweighs the quantity of support. By acknowledging such complexities, counselors can provide tailored support that respects and responds to the diverse needs of each individual. Next slide. So, religious diversity, defining spirituality and religion. They can be viewed both as a unified domain and as diverse ways people seek out connection, purpose, and meaning in their lives. There are elements of interconnectedness and also some distinct characteristics that set them apart. Canadian research has shown that most counselors, approximately 54%, state that they do not feel comfortable, confident, or competent enough to integrate spirituality into counseling practices. That's from our textbook, Arthur 2018. As we've discussed in our studies, values in counseling aren't neutral. We each enter this field with varied and unique backgrounds, beliefs, life experiences, and values. In order to develop a sense of competence when exploring a client's religious or spiritual domain, really this is rooted in a counselor's self-awareness, contextual sensitivity, and ethical practice. In the upcoming 2 slides, we'll explore the positive impacts that religion and spirituality as it informs the treatment process, along with some of the challenges and barriers. Next slide. Yeah, religion as a strength. So many new Canadians show resiliency and coping with acculturation stressors, not through traditional counseling practices, but because of their faith, including spirituality and religious practices. Throughout the peer-reviewed research, this is often referred to as religious coping. Coping can be defined as specific strategies that are conscious efforts to reduce stress in difficult situations. For many immigrants and refugees, religion is viewed as a resource, a place of strength and resiliency during times of adversity. Religious involvement can offer opportunities for Canadians to receive social support through the networks that exist within religious and spiritual communities, often providing a sense of community and belonging with others who share similar beliefs and experiences. Places of worship often facilitate the integration process by connecting newcomers with local resources, supportive services, and community events. Religious affiliation often serves as a source of guidance, offering a moral and ethical framework for living. This support can help immigrants make decisions and navigate daily challenges in a new society. Religious affiliation can also bridge cultural preservation, supporting immigrants and refugees to maintain a sense of their cultural identity and traditions, which can be crucial to their sense of identity and belonging in this new environment. Next slide. So looking at religion as a challenge, when exploring treatment challenges associated with immigrant and refugee religiosity, several themes emerged. First one being conflict with the host culture. So newcomers can face tension between their religious beliefs and the secular beliefs or values that are dominant, that are there in dominant practice within Canadian society. The way nativists treat newcomers can create a sense of othering, fostering a us versus them mentality. That's from Ahmad 2024. And a survey conducted by Cardis Research indicated that Canada's increasing immigrant population shows a stronger commitment to religious and spiritual practices compared to Canadian-born citizens, meaning immigrants tend to favor a greater role of religious expression in daily life than Canadian-born citizens. Stigmatization as another challenge. Immigrants and refugees often fear being turned away or humiliated due to their struggles with English, as well as their different behaviors, beliefs, and rituals, and this can negatively impact help-seeking behaviors. Immigrants and refugees may also face discrimination or misunderstanding related to their religious practices, which can impact their integration and sense of safety. For example, the alarming rates of Islamophobia. Statistics Canada reported 71% increase in police-reported anti-Muslim hate crimes in 2021, and hate crimes targeting Muslims rose by 94% between 2022 and 2023. Effective access to resources. So this is often a result of barriers associated with language and transportation. A lack of connection to one's religious community can be understood as both in-group and out-group support networks, as Milo 22 defines it, often resulting in an increased isolation and emotional distress. And the last challenge that we're going to touch on is religious trauma and extremism. So in some instances, religious beliefs can be misinterpreted or deliberately exploited to justify abuses of power, exclusion, or extremist views. This can lead to division within communities and result in the oppression of certain populations. The impact of nativism and societal exclusion can disrupt migrants' cultural or religious identities, potentially leading them to either adopt a more radical religious belief or abandon their identity altogether. Religion can have negative consequences. Many individuals have suffered due to immoral and questionable actions within some religious communities. Issues such as sexual abuse, prejudice, certain fundamentalist beliefs, grounded in racism and sexism, have all resulted in significant harm to individuals. These experiences, often referred to as religious trauma, can have a profound impact on one's mental and emotional health. Next slide. So now we have a counseling role play, followed by a group debrief. So Helvecia and Karen are our counselor and client in this situation. Helvecia is a recent refugee who identifies as Christian. She has 3 children. She was separated from her husband during the asylum seeking process, and her husband is now in hiding in their home country. She is struggling in the resettlement process. She's reported experiencing symptoms related to grief, loss, trauma, and general feelings of overwhelm. Karen is a new counselor at a community mental health clinic that offers free private and group counseling to new Canadians. They've had an initial intake meeting, and this is their second session together.
Good afternoon, Helvecia.
Good afternoon.
Hello. I'm happy to see you back again for another session this week. I was able to talk to you last week at our intake and got a little bit of your story, but I'm curious again today. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Like I said last week, I've just immigrated to Canada about 6 months ago. Still waiting for my refugee claim to go through. Had really tough time in my country immigrating, but I managed to come with my 3 children. My husband got lost along the way. He's hiding somewhere back home. We're not sure exactly where he is, but we know he's alive. But I'm finding it really, really hard to settle here. Things are not going at all the way I thought it would be. I'm worried about whether our claim will be approved. I've got 2 children who've got disabilities that I'm trying to support, and things are really tough for me. As I said, I don't really feel like I'm giving the best life to my kids. I don't feel worthy as a mom. And all of this is just being very traumatic for me.
Okay, what I'm hearing you saying is that you have a lot going on, and then coming to a new country with children on your own and not really knowing where your husband is. That is a lot, and that must take enormous amount of strength every day.
It does, it does. And also, I am a Christian woman. I am a Roman Catholic. I do believe that things are going to work out, but it's just so difficult for me to even believe in God right now because everything is just so difficult.
I can really hear what you're saying. So for the purpose of today and our session, we have about 15 minutes here together, and I'd like to know what would be the very best use of your time. We, like you said, you've talked about your struggles that you've had, and I'm wondering if maybe looking at supports in your community, or looking at talking about some of the emotional side of what you're dealing with would be a good use of our time, but it's up to you.
Yes, talking about the emotional side would definitely be of help. That's the idea that I had before coming to the sessions, that is going to be that. But I don't know if it's going to, because I feel so alone. So maybe also, I don't know how I can really create relationships that can support me with all that I'm going through right now.
Okay. You'd mentioned that you are Roman Catholic. I just am curious to hear about how that might be a support for you in times of challenge like you're in right now.
I don't know how they can help me, or how my community can help me in that sense. All I do right now is just pray, read my Bible and pray, but it doesn't really help me. I don't know what else about my faith, about my religious practice I could do to help me. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's certainly, faith doesn't always make sense. I too am Roman Catholic, so I understand parts of that. There's to be practicing Roman Catholic, there's, can feel like pressure sometimes. And also being a mother, of course, I understand that too. So I'm wondering if, just for an example, instead of saying the whole rosary, you could just do 1 decade of the rosary.
Okay.
How does that feel?
I can do that. I can say a decade of the rosary so as not to put so much pressure on myself. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of hearing some hesitation.
I'm hesitating because maybe I don't know if I was thinking that you'll be telling me to pray more rather than pray less, but I do see how that would take off some pressure from me as well, and maybe just giving my head some space to breathe. So that's why I am not too sure about it, but I'm willing to embrace it.
Okay. All right. So coming into or coming to the nearing the end of our session, if you were to pray more and feel some support with that, what is a step you could take towards that that would feel doable for you with all the other stuff that goes on in your week?
Maybe I could reach out to my priest, the priest of my parish, and see if there are any groups or any suggestions that they can give me with regards to connecting with people who are probably going through similar situations like myself within my Christian faith community, and see if there's someone that I can work with.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say that you will reach out in your parish to
Yes.
someone who could support you with that.
Mhm.
And is there anyone you have in mind? Your priest or?
The priest, yes, but maybe that would be like a first step. So then seeing what else is available, because unless it is in confession, to be honest, I don't want to be telling the priest. You probably not have gotten the kind of experience that I have had migrating from my country to here, so they might not really relate, but they can support and point me in the right direction for sure.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's good insight for me as well as a counselor. And for sure, our stories are different. And I respect that you've went through a lot, especially moving to Canada with your children and all of those challenges that you face. I want to thank you for coming in today and going into next week. I look forward to hearing from you about how it went.
Yeah, thank you so much for hearing me out today, and I'll definitely be back next week to see how far I've gone.
So this is the debrief portion of our role play. Both Erin and I are going to join in this conversation from Helvetia and Karen's role play, and we're going to start with the counselor feedback and the client feedback.
Okay, so thank you. As the counselor, I definitely take this as a learning experience. So Helvetia and I had a conversation prior a little bit about how we do it. So we had the story together. And while I was doing the counseling, I was kind of wondering if I should do that we both were Roman Catholic as a rapport, or if we would use it for demonstrating transference. And so for me, that was a huge learning experience. And I think it relates well with some of the content that we've talked about earlier in our presentation. And so I'll pass it on to Helvetia.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think our session was quite informative, even though we did discuss it a little bit earlier, just to have context. It felt really natural when we were on the call. And the fact that both of us have the same religion, we both Roman Catholic, I was thinking that there was going to be a lot of transparency happening there. But I found that you try to rein it in, you try to not push it too much, and it was okay for me that you mentioned that you were Roman Catholic as well. It created a connection, and you didn't really go too much into your background about it. So that was okay. I don't know how others feel about that. And the other thing I want to also point out was in a setting like this, especially for a refugee that's gone through so much and that's feeling marginalized, you might find that there's this power issue happening, and therefore a counselor really needs to be aware. I didn't feel out of place. I don't know how you felt about your power over me in that instance, but I didn't feel too much out of place. And it might be that that's because you did mention something that we kind of connected on, which is again my religion. So that's what I have to share about that.
Okay. I thought that Karen's counselor's use of the micro skills was good. I think that there was attending and like an expression that you were with her, you gave space to allow her to speak. And then when there was quiet, you took that opportunity to offer something. I liked near the end how you were trying to sort of summarize and using some of the words that she had used to offer understanding. I saw that sort of connect you around some mutual understanding. I too was a bit curious about the power piece when we're looking at areas of improvement, as we all of us are. I wonder whether or not in the beginning of sessions, when do people address it? Do we not address it? Is there a discussion around it? Is there not a discussion around it? Do you play that by ear? Those are just all questions that came up for me as I was sort of using my CIC lens to consider how this power imbalance is, if there's an imbalance and if it feels that way and how it plays out. I think the other thing, last thing I'm going to share, Karen, was that as some of the research shared earlier in this presentation, that 54% of counselors, based on Arthur 2018, talk about feeling insecure and lacking confidence and competence to even bring up religion and spirituality in the counseling classroom venue. So I think that it's murky territory, and I think that it was a good job that you guys had an opportunity to speak about it in the session and also after. So I will leave it at that. What about you, Erin?
Yeah, I felt that you, Karen, towards the I think, yeah, towards the end of the session, you started trying to connect the client to her culture through her faith. And given that a refugee coming over will be not only like, she's not connected to their own culture or faith, they're not connected to the mood culture in any way. So they're really put at a huge psychological challenges, mental health challenges, and a feeling like a lack of belonging. So I feel like that was an important piece to kind of to go towards because of where this client might find themselves. So connecting to support systems, I felt that was really important direction to go, and maybe building off of these, building off of this and exploring with the client a little bit more, maybe what her experience has been so far, like with migrating, like, because there's been so much that has happened. I felt like where you may have been able to go further would have been to build a little bit more safety within the space through relationship building and connecting on a more a deeper level around her experience. So maybe asking more of those questions, like what was it like to leave your husband? What was it like to migrate over here or connect to the systems here? Do you have care for your children? How is it like waiting your claim to go through and, not being not sure whether you're going to have to leave or whether you'll be able to stay. So just like connecting through emotion initially, and then building on, okay, so what can we do now to advocate for you and to help you connect back to your culture, or connect better here to this culture. Yeah, so I mean, those are some of the thoughts that I had, but overall felt it was really great watching you two.
Hey.
Okay, so I will just conclude our presentation by saying that culturally responsive counseling with new Canadians requires that we maintain ethical care through cultural safety and autonomy, recognize the many intersecting identities that shape their experiences, and adapt our interventions accordingly, advocate for social justice within systems while navigating barriers, and continuously reflect on our own power and privilege in relation to those we are serving. Thank you all for your time and your attention and presence throughout our presentation. Thank you.